Hello and welcome back to part 2 where we're reviewing the world building of the Harry Potter franchise. For those of you who are new here, we explored a lot of the elements already as to what might be the origins of magic, and what kind of magic the wizarding world has actually been using all along. Feel free to click the link in the corner. Trust me, there's a lot that you'll need to catch up on. And if you want to see more content in the upcoming future, click the subscribe button and help world build this channel for others to see as well. Would be mighty kind of you. For all of you returning, let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. So, let's continue exploring this world of magic by analyzing one of the darkest elements in it, and that is Dementors. That's right, the dark, grim reaper-looking creatures that can literally suck the joy out of you to death and are the infamous guards of Azkaban prison. Feared by all, with no allegiance and unable to tell the difference between friend and foe so long as they can feed on human joy. But here's the thing, there isn't any specific origin as to where the Dementors came from. The only known records are, ironically, on Azkaban itself. Basically, centuries ago, there was a dark and cruel wizard who built a home/tower for himself on a lonely island. There, in full privacy, he would wait for whatever ship to wash ashore on his island, and was so cruel he would have fun torturing and killing any muggle who might have the misfortune to end up there. It went on for so many years that it became a place drenched in misery and tragedy. So much so that after this dark wizard passed away, that energy of misery lingered for a long while, and was so strong that it straight up lured Dementors there, who'd keep on sucking joy and souls out of marooned muggles. When the Ministry discovered this place, they decided that the building the wizard built there would be the perfect place as a prison for wizards, and since the Dementors were already there, fearing they might reach the mainland and invade the rest of the world, they made an agreement with them. The Dementors would work there as guards for the prison, and in exchange, the Dementors would remain only there with a never-ending source of food to feed upon from all the prisoners that were brought in. Certainly cheaper than giving them a salary, that's for sure. And so, yeah, that's kinda it. We don't really know much else about the origins of the Dementors, only that they kinda just showed up there and seeked joy or souls to feed upon. So what could these things be? Well, I think there could be a solution, and it can be found in none other than the Fantastic Beasts series. And yes, I know, like I said last time, they're way too much of a mess and I don't want to count them, but there is one element that ironically does work, and that is obscurus. For those of you who don't remember, not that I blame you, an obscurus is a dark, magical force that is born out of the repressed magical potential of a witch or wizard. It's actually a really important and perfectly logical element here. A witch or wizard can't just not use magic, because if they suppress it too much and for too long, it turns into this destructive magical force that can't be controlled or tamed anymore. Something even the wizarding community absolutely fears. In fact, this would just add to our theory mentioned in the previous video, that of magic actually being chaos magic in this world, that wizards have to harness and keep under control and smoothen out just by using any spell, potion, or whatever, and in turn it's fueled by strong, raw, and especially negative emotions, aka why muggles can't know about magic or they'd make it go berserk. This chaos magic then would also be fueled even more if the witch or wizard in question is forced to keep it all repressed, feeding on growing negative emotions until it bursts out of control and even a group of wizards can't tame it. So, here's my proposition. What if obscurus, if not stopped, slowly transformed over time into Dementors? It would make sense because it would first off give them an origin, there would be a reason for them to be such dark creatures, and not only that, it would explain why they seek the joy and souls of others. Because they're literally born out of a lack of joy and serenity that comes from being unable to express your emotions and magic, something that these Dementors will forever seek in their lives, eternally hungry and eternally searching. We can even say that centuries ago, since magic folk didn't go into hiding just yet, they were in general more free to use magic, and muggles started developing culturally and technologically. Eras like the Salem witch trials would be the perfect breeding grounds for the creation of an obscurus. And yes, we did say that muggles back then didn't actually recognize an actual witch if they found one, but the same can't necessarily be said for children, who wouldn't necessarily know they're born with magic yet, wouldn't know that it's okay, might not have been found by the wizarding community in time, and out of fear of being burned, would keep themselves repressed until an obscural is born. Do it just enough times during this era, and it would coincide with when the Dark Wizard built his place on that island, a place filled with so much tragedy and misery that it attracted a sudden urge of obscurals, and they stayed there so long, absorbing so many souls, that they formed a consciousness of their own, eventually becoming Dementors. And the Ministry couldn't even get rid of them, cause it turns out they can't even be killed, but can only be controlled, quarantined, or distracted. The only actual canonical way to kill a Dementor is to make them just starve to death. And while it would be good that by this point the wizarding world would make sure not to create more obscurals, good luck in making sure Dementors would never have a source to feed upon. Certainly not in our muggle day and age at least, that's for sure. House Elves. Alright, so last time we talked about how goblins have their society structured and live among wizards thanks to places like Diagon Alley. Again, watch the previous video if you want more details. But they're not the only magical race in the wizarding world. Sure, you got centaurs and giants and such, but they're pretty secluded in the woods and don't want to be bothered anyway. And one can say that they reached an agreement with wizards where they'll be left alone as long as they don't show themselves to muggles. Yet the ones that actually do interact with wizards the most are none other than House Elves. There are a couple of problems with them, however. First off, why are they at all under the command of wizards even when they're absolutely horribly mistreated, despite being pretty damn powerful? In fact, it's canonical that they keep their powers even after they're free. So why hasn't there been a secret revolt to free all of them the minute any of them wasn't under a wizard's control? And second, why is it that clothes of all things are what helped them become free? Well, regarding the first part about them keeping all their power, honestly guys, that just doesn't make sense. These are small creatures but that can do all sorts of powerful magic, and they do it naturally without the need of a wand. That's way more OP than your typical wizard, and even Voldemort would have issues against a horde of them if they so desired. So I think there should be a modification here, and ironically it would tie in with how they're freed. What if House Elves actually weren't all that powerful after all? When alone, in the same way goblins might have dimensional magic as stated in the previous video, the elves might excel instead in teleportation or defense magic, to compensate with their small stature, ensuring they wouldn't be so easily harmed, or at least escape with extreme ease. We could even say that, centuries ago, they'd realize they can't keep up with this lifestyle anymore and would need help. So they would seek the help of wizards. Except wizards can't just hand their power to others, magical or not, otherwise they would have shared this burden of harnessing chaos magic with muggles all along. It's just not possible. So instead, the agreement would be that elves would literally tie their magic to that of wizards, willingly serving them because it's better than to be out in the cold with dangerous predators they always have to be escaping from, but in exchange they could power up their own magic because they'd be drawing it from the source of their masters. A sudden source so powerful that it would enable an elf to accomplish almost anything the wizard desires, with less hassles than the wizard itself, as long as it doesn't go against the main wizarding laws. Dare I say, this symbiosis would be so intricate that it would be as if the elves would be sewing their fabric of magic to a much more extensive one of a wizard. And that's why presenting an elf with clothes would free it, because it would symbolically indicate that no elf, your magical binding cloth is no longer needed, and I'd rather replace it with this. You have been severed. Once they're separated though, the elves will not be able to draw on so much power again, and can't accomplish great feats anymore. Only be great experts at defense and evasion, which would still enable someone like Dobby to keep on protecting Harry and his friends when needed, even if he can't actually help them. The only problem? Well, not to open a big can of worms, but let's face it. We humans, once we get used to something, have a really hard time to turn back or resist that advantage. And after so many decades and centuries, wizards would get so used to having helpers around the house that literally can't leave unless allowed so, and are so magically bound to obey any order, and can even live up to 200 years by the way, that this master-slave culture becomes formed. If nothing else though, at least changes would be put into place over time, with people like Dobby proving they can be far greater allies when freed, even Creature proving he'd be much more loyal if only treated better, and frankly all the elves in the kitchen at Hogwarts willingly working there without pay, because centuries ago Helga Hufflepuff herself used it as a safe haven for elves to willingly work to their heart's content, without being enslaved, and without fear or risk of being enslaved by another witch or wizard ever again. It really is their choice to stay. And so, hopefully, in time, these elves will have a safe future after all. Paintings and photos. Okay, so this is an element that really bugged me for years. In the Potterverse, all magic homes, schools, etc. have any painting and photo with the figures inside of it moving and talking freely, even interacting with real people. And whenever I saw these, I always kept thinking one main thing. How the hell is no one communicating with the dead through these? Seriously, anyone who dies would still be in a painting and you can still communicate with them even after death forever. Dumbledore dying? No problem, he has a portrait of himself in the headmaster's office so he could give all the advice you want. Peter Pettigrew? Sirius wouldn't have needed to worry about using him as testimony for his innocence, just interrogate a photo or a painting of him. Or hell, what about Harry's own parents? I know it wouldn't be the same thing as them being alive, but geez, he could at least communicate them through a damn photo. Why aren't they relied upon more often? And hell, ignoring that, what does it even mean to be a painting? Is this like a pocket dimension of its own where all the paintings can just go from one to another with ease? How would you like to wake up to suddenly find out you're actually someone else's consciousness placed inside of a frame at the mercy of anyone who might burn you as a prank and you're never free to escape again? Well, turns out this was actually canonically a little more accounted for than I expected. See, it's true that anyone can have a photo or painting made of themselves, but that doesn't mean it will have the full representation of themselves. The figure is incomplete and represents less than half of what the original person is or was.
I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
Alright, that accounts for a fair bit actually, but even more so is the process of creating a painting. See, the painter itself not only can't recreate a full version of the subject, but even then, it's the painter's interpretation of what the subject actually is like. So someone like Dumbledore, who is riddled with secrets and mysteries, would only essentially be someone else's doodle without any of the actual secrets he'd know. So unless the painter knew Dumbledore in person really well, it will never be the same thing. Heck, maybe they might not even recognize the same people the original figure knew in life if the painter didn't account for that as well. But it still leaves with the issue of what it's like for the painted figures themselves. If they really are actual sentient beings, then a painter could essentially be creating life, for better or worse, and that's honestly a lot to digest. Not to mention that the figures themselves, as mentioned before, would have a moment of crisis the moment they realize what they are. So instead, I propose a small modification. Not only do they have the same memories of the original person, but perhaps these work more so like, say, automatons. They're actually not sentient, but give the impression that they are with how they move and how they respond. dare I say it's the Wizarding World's version of a generated AI with a moving face, minus the job complications. And also, it would make sense for them to come to life only when other wizards are around, with the chaos magic surrounding them able to grant them life and movement, kinda like a jukebox, even going so far as communicating with other paintings if commanded to do so, without the moral quarries of what the painting themselves feel and think. Finally, there's one more thing to take into account. Because this movement happens to both paintings and photos, just to keep the rules a little more balanced, perhaps we can say that the more detail is given to the finished product, the more cemented the image is, and chaos magic would have less control over their movements. So a painting that would have less detail and more clear brushstrokes can move and interact more easily with wizards, whereas a photo, being of much higher detail, has little room for chaos magic to move it around, so photos are stuck at most only doing simple repetitive moves. This way, Harry will still feel the weight of the loss of his parents despite having moving photos of them, and not even Sirius can just claim his innocence to Harry through a newspaper article. Look, I know it's a bit of a stretch, but for real guys, these things need to be nerfed or they'll just nullify most narrative tension for the whole story. Religion. Alright, look, I will be covering a touchy subject because it deals with people's beliefs. But just to be clear, it's all just as a narrative exercise, nothing personal towards anyone, so please let's all be chill, okay? We good? Alright, we good. With that said, here's a fun little detail for all the folks in the 2000s who thought Potter was a satanic story. And that is, Hogwarts and the Wizarding World as a whole celebrate Christmas, the most uber-religious celebration we have on the whole planet. So yes, you can put your pitchforks down. In fact, it's stated that Hogwarts allows the practice of all religions except Wiccan, which I admit is kind of funny considering that yes, there already is magic in Hogwarts. Although to be clear, if I missed the point regarding Wiccan culture and religion, I'm not an expert and could be wrong, so apologies in advance and feel free to correct me in the comments down below. Just wanted to be clear on that. Either way, it is pretty interesting to see that wizards and witches do indeed celebrate Muggle festivities such as this. It would imply then that people like, Christ weren't just wizards mistaken for divine figures. This community actually believes in the religious events. It is possible, of course, that wizards might have adopted these traditions through Muggles before they went into hiding, and perhaps the reasons Hogwarts celebrates it is so students, or at least the majority of them statistically I guess, have something to anchor themselves to spiritually while discovering that magic is a very real thing, as it could upset their core beliefs and cause stress. And if chaos magic is real, we know what that could mean. Hell, even the fat friar ghost was, well, a friar and a wizard, so clearly he was a Christian believer, and that was fine. But I always found it curious that wizards and witches didn't just create their own religions based on magic. Like, the closest I guess would be the pureblood believers, but I can't think of much else. And I know that wizardry is more akin to science, with wizards discovering all these spells and potions and such through experimentation and whatever, but I'm pretty shocked they haven't split into other religions based on magic. I mean, even nowadays we have scientists who are still religious, so that should be fine. Like, what if there were disagreements on whether it truly was chaos magic, and maybe they thought it was some sort of a divine force? Then you'd have factions of people being devoted to respecting and worshipping magic of all sorts, and maybe building their own shrines to it or something. Or perhaps some think that modern wizardry is warping the original form of magic and should leave it be, as an unstoppable force that should alter things because that's the way the world is meant to be. And frankly, at this point, I'd say that this could be exactly where dark magic falls into. Because if you think about it, it's never really explained what dark magic really means or what it entails. It's just dark. So at this point, I'd say that it means this: that magic shouldn't be harnessed the way it has been so far to be smoothed out, but to find a way to let the chaotic part of it run wild because that's the natural way of things. Heck, maybe the ones who do believe this are indeed those who in general have less empathy towards others, so they wouldn't care if it caused harm. Voldemort being the prime example of this since he was born out of a love potion, meaning he can't feel empathy or love of any sorts. And while one might think, well, why send them to Hogwarts then? The reason could be that they're first off even fewer in numbers than the already scarce wizards in the world, and second, they'd know that you need to understand the rules before you can break them. So, learning about magic in general first would be the best way to later on make sure they'd know how to undo it all due to their beliefs in the purity of chaos magic. Something so shocking and taboo that it's exactly why they don't advertise their intentions to the world, and they're super secretive even among wizards, and why they rallied up behind Voldy so easily because he was the first to succeed at going against the entire system thanks to his sheer power, until his demise. So yeah, just wanted to explore that a little, but religion and magic wouldn't even necessarily end there. Like, how did the four founding fathers, or heck even Merlin since he was a canonical character, not become full-on religious figures considering how powerful they were at their time? Yeah, I know others used magic too, but theirs was supposedly so advanced and swag that it could have baffled even other wizards of the time. So I think that not only Hogwarts would have created the four houses for students, but maybe it could have accidentally developed an entire religion across the entire community based on them, with people worshipping one of the houses depending on which they respect and believe in the most. They could even each have their own interpretations of what actually lies beyond death. Although, I'll actually stop here with the speculations, because we will be touching on that subject another time. I just wanted to mostly highlight the absence of magical religions in the wizarding world, besides the pureblood or mudblood stuff, because I think there could have been plenty of room to explore. For now though, let's move on to what is possibly one of the most powerful and world-ending elements in the franchise if handled wrong, and that is none other than time turners. That's right, the goddamn time turners. Ever since they were introduced, everyone has been asking the same damn questions. Why doesn't anyone use this to travel back in time and kill Voldemort when he was a baby or whatever? Why give something so powerful to Hermione just so she could attend more classes? Why isn't anything solved with this goddamn thing? Well, it turns out this is also kind of surprisingly accounted for. See, the movies don't explain this well, but it turns out there are two types of time turners, limited and real ones. The limited time turners are the ones we see in Prisoner of Azkaban, and they're called so because it turns out they do have a limit, and a very specific one. It was discovered that a witch or wizard has a 5-hour time window in which they can travel, and it's only within that time frame that there will be no consequences to the world or to the traveler themselves. It's sort of a safety bubble in which events will just repeat themselves without consequences, which would allow Harry and Hermione to travel within that time frame to save Buckbeak and Sirius in a safe manner. However, then we have real time turners. Real time turners are instead the ones that don't have that 5-hour time limit and instead can help you travel back in time as far as you like, technically. The only safety nets are that they're incredibly rare, they are immediately outlawed and confiscated by the Ministry the moment they're discovered because they could be indeed too dangerous. They were invented only after the events of the Second Wizarding War, so Harry and Voldy couldn't have had access to them, and even if you do travel a long distance in time, you only have a 5-minute window to do whatever you need to do before you're pulled back to your present time. And fair warning, here is where I will be discussing spoilers regarding the Cursed Child. If you want to avoid spoilers, go to this timestamp. This exact situation is what happens with Albus Potter and Scorpius when they try to go back in time to save Cedric from being killed. But it still doesn't mean that timelines can't be changed entirely, as is the case when the two accidentally create an alternate future where Voldemort did actually win in the Battle of Hogwarts. Look, I know, the implications of this story are bonkers, but that's what we got. So, While they are accounted for much more than one might think, there are still some issues. First off, with limited time turners, while it is true that you have this safety net of 5 hours, and you can't go beyond that, and time can't be altered in this bubble, the consequences can still be dire. If you can't change history, and anything that happens there becomes like a fixed point in time, you could accidentally cause trouble that was always meant to happen, just by deciding to use the damn thing. There's a lot of moral implications here. Like, okay, this will get complicated, so bear with me, but suppose we have one timeline. You start from point A, you reach time B normally, you realize something needs to be changed, so you'll travel back to point A and redo your stuff. But that thing in the bubble that needs changing was always meant to be changed in the right way, and once you're past point B, you can't travel back again, otherwise you'll end up in this loop forever. And if you just go back to point A, turn it again, and keep hopping 5 hours back, you might as well be fully time traveling. So I'd imagine the time turner will stop working once you return to the time from which you left. But now, look at this. Once you've created this loop, it will always stay this way. The question I have, and it applies to all other time travel stories by the way, is how the hell do you know that a loop is about to be opened? It's binary. Either you open it and it exists, or you don't and it doesn't exist, but you can't predict in advance if there will be a necessity for it. And even then, you don't know what could accidentally happen within that time bubble. And once it's activated, that's it. So how can any witch or wizard know when to use this properly and not accidentally create a mess just by activating it? Well, there are actually two ways we can fix this. First off, if time turners are a real risky and experimental thing, perhaps the reason Hermione was chosen to use it is because not only she is a brilliant witch for her age, not only she clearly refused the idea of divination as a legit class because it made no sense to her, so she'd be a firm believer in time being a much more scientific and concrete thing to study, not a flimsy one, but perhaps they saw that she had the potential to become one day a scientist who could specifically study the effects of time, something even adults still don't know everything of, and they'd want to test her out. Not only that, but giving it to her for the exclusive use of time jumping between classes means that, by the Turner's rules, the events would already be laid out in a predictable schedule for her to traverse through, inside of one of the most heavily magically barricaded places in the world, Hogwarts, and if she kept time traveling and creating these pre-scheduled loops here, there could have been a chance that even chaos magic would become predictable in this way because it's under a strict class schedule, eliminating the anticipation of its randomness, which, as we said in the previous video, is the entire point of what these wizards are doing. It isn't a perfect solution though, and that's why it's only an experiment, thinking boring predictable classes would be as safe a bet as any. But that leaves a problem. With this scenario, how would Hermione have known to open the time loop to save Buckbeak and Sirius before knowing it would have been a necessity at all? While those events were going on, there weren't any schedules at that time either to rely upon. So what gives? Why was this loop opened without anyone's input? Well, here's where I think there's a clear answer. I propose that time turners might, on occasion, be sensitive to one particular type of magical effect happening. An effect that, when it does happen, would signal them to open a loop automatically without a wizard's input or knowledge. And that effect is prophecies. Whenever a prophecy is about to be created, if it's within that 5-hour safety net, depending on the type of prophecy, the time turners might sense it and activate to them on their own without prior warning. And lo and behold, what happens in Prisoner of Azkaban before Harry and Hermione time travel? Harry meets with Professor Trelawney, who in that very moment gives him a vision of what will happen that very night. Divination might even be the most mysterious kind of chaos magic out there, as unpredictable as the class subject itself, but so powerful that it activated the time turner, forcing it to create and open a brand new time loop, with Hermione unaware that this happened at all until Dumbledore told her so. Why? Because he's Dumbledore, and it wouldn't have been that improbable for him to have seen two versions of his favorite students roaming the grounds from his office. But okay, we made a huge deal about limited time turners. What about the real ones that help you travel years or even decades into the past? And again, we will be discussing spoilers about the Cursed Child, so you've been warned, but, well, honestly guys, that's just way too dangerous to even propose. Sure, the one real time turner we see was created after Voldemort's defeat, but any follower could grab it and screw the entire world and... Look, time travel is just way too dangerous in general, and bringing it up breaks almost any story if not handled carefully. But if we really have to keep the plot of the Cursed Child as it is, then I see only one solution. I think that when this device is activated, it doesn't help the traveler go back in their timeline, but traverse sideways to an alternate timeline. One where historical events happened differently and branched off elsewhere. The danger here then would have been that Scorpius, if he had not fixed everything, would have remained in this parallel multiverse reality where Voldemort won. And if there's a world where dark magic rules, aka magic without positive emotions such as love, and if it is chaos magic as we've been saying so far, then it means there would only be an abundance of the chaotic part of it, untamable, until it would overwhelm the entire world and nullify that reality entirely. Meaning that Voldemort's reign where dark magic rules would have been a certain doom for everyone from the start, and it's a good thing that he lost. And the only way to save yourself is to jump ship and return to your original timeline, which will have always continued on as it should. Look guys, I know it's a lot, and I can't see any other solution without them just breaking all reality. And yet, even then, we're not done uncovering all the elements that this franchise has to offer. So yes, if you want to know more and get into the nitty-gritty details of what true secrets the wizarding world is keeping from you, join me next time in the third and final part of the analysis of the world building of the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join my Patreon to help support what I do here, and I'll see you all at the final part. And of course, in the meantime, keep building worlds.